mental problems. And there's no escaping it. Because we have been chained, as he says, from childhood. For it's as if we are living in a cave, in an underground cave. Now, the reason why we've been chained from childhood, not born with this, but chained since childhood, is that we are under the influence of a whole class of beliefs, and these beliefs have then become for us believable. And when you have a state where you believe something to be true, you don't see it as a belief, you assume it's true, and you see through that truth as if it were truth itself. Therefore, the thing that you do have in the realm of belief is the image of the people that appeared so believable to you that you believed their belief they were teaching you. Isn't that a nice way to put it? Let's see if I can do it again, all right? For Plato, this is called the divided line. The divided line, therefore, takes on a pictorial form called the allegory of the cave in the upper world. All right? And let's draw it, all right? My art is really something that I often admire. Cave, open to the upper world. We are chained, fettered from birth, such that we have to look straight ahead at the wall of the cave, and we're chained in such a way that we can't turn our heads one way or the other. Therefore, you can't see one another. All you can see are the shadows that are being reflected on the wall of the cave. There's a vast opening, therefore it allows some light to go through. But behind these prisoners is a raised platform. And on that platform, there are figures that move back and forth with objects on their heads. And this wall, as it were, blocks them from any view. But behind them, up a ways, is a fire. And that fire, therefore, brings illumination. And these objects, therefore, bounce off the wall of the cave, and that's what these people take to be their reality. As if. Now, equally well, since they don't know anything else, there are also shadows of themselves on the wall of the cave, which they take to be themselves. These objects that these men carry on their heads are images of mankind. Man-made images. Man-made images. Man-made images. Where do those images come from in Plato? They come from our earliest teachers. They come from all of those people who influenced us in our youth. All the influences in our youth where anyone tried to persuade you and I of the truth of some belief. Especially two kinds of belief. About the nature of the self and the nature of reality. The biggest of all teachers in the Platonic world is society itself. Society is the greatest sophist of them all. For in every way, in many ways, they try to show the student or the person, the individual, you and I, what to believe in and what to accept as real. And what it is nothing other than these images, therefore, that are bouncing off the wall of the cave as shadows. Well, in order for these images to be believable, in order for the images to be believable, the teachings to be believable, the absolute essential thing is that the believers had to believe those influencing them were in fact knowers, really knew what they were talking about, were sincere, and had their best interest at heart. That's the problem. You don't believe a belief because it's believable. You believe a belief because the person who instructed you is believable. That they made themselves believable. They made themselves so endearing and they appeared so strong and so magnificent at that moment when they're trying to inculcate these beliefs, that to reject them would be to reject the fact that they're in that wonderful state of convincing you. At that moment, you know what? Every parent is what? Believable. They appear sincere. They appear knowing. To reject what they say would be, in fact, nothing other than to repudiate them in their moment of glory, because this is their highest moment of glory, when they're then trying to convince you about the truth of themselves, about the self, about society, and especially about the nature of reality. Uh-oh, nose is too long. So look here. Caught in this means, therefore, if you challenge the belief, you're challenging the very moment when this was inculcated. To separate yourself from beliefs, therefore, is to separate yourself from the very people who inculcated and brought about that belief and made it believable. And that's always a tension, because that means you have to stand alone, independent from what it appears to be all your supporting methods that they then, in some sense, promise you, if you are, in fact, a believer. Therefore, in the Platonic world, the person has to see that what they believe to be true is only an image of this moment. They have to then begin to see, they have to reflect back on the origins of their belief, they have to discover under what conditions they were brought to believe it, and they have to recognize one way or the other that the teaching itself was always at variance with the nature of reality in yourself. You know why? Who can tell you the truth about the nature of reality? Isn't that a guess? Everybody, every parent wants to help their child, and therefore they want to prepare them for life, and therefore they want to confide in them the very things that were important to them. You know what? How many people have gained a real insight into the nature of the self and the nature of reality to be able to communicate that with all of the devotion and the sincerity and truth? Does it match what they themselves have discovered, or have they done nothing other than give a belief that was taught to them? I once worked with an 11-year-old boy who had a problem. Parents were there. It was really interesting because the parents said, "Oh my gosh, I realized, that's right. I really was trying to persuade my kid of the truth of this. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I was just trying to share." I said, "Well, where did you get it?" He said, "Well, yeah, hey, that's right. That happened to me when I was..." Matter of fact, something very similar happened to me with my mother and gee, I'll have to ask her. I said, "Well, where does she live?" And she said, "Well, nearby." So a couple of weeks later, the son, the father, and the grandparent of the child came, and we had the opportunity to talk to the grandparent. The grandparent went through the same kind of analysis and said, "Oh my God, I didn't know that that was being believed the way it was. I didn't know it would have all those consequences on the person. I didn't know that would frame their perceptions about the nature of life and all their expectations." Good heavens. I said, "Well, where did you get it?" And they said, "Well, it's very interesting you asked that question, because I remember there's some beliefs I think go back to the cave. It's not a good and bad game. It's not a good and bad game. Very often they're trying to do something at that time, which is, as far as they're concerned, their highest vision. And the problem with life is that we don't have enough enlightened parents. That's all. I checked my own. And let me assure you, as nice as they may be in many ways, they were not among those who regarded as enlightened. So look here, Platonic. What is the relationship between these two, therefore?